Hello folks, Scott here with my 10 cards inspired by the new Love From Lizi July 2021 Summer Botany card kit. This kit's overflowing with beautiful florals and all sorts of papers. As usual, I do cut the 8.5 inch by 11 inch colored cardstock in our kits down to A2 card sizes and use those for my card bases. Lizi kept referring to multimedia projects when she was doing her unboxing, so I figured I would go in that direction. So my first card here, you can see on the back it has stamped Made with Love. That's one of the stamps from the kit. This is on the warm yellow card base. And we have, when we have each other, we have everything. I think I took that multimedia suggestion to heart with this card. To begin with, I ink smooshed this warm yellow card base with vintage photo, aged mahogany, and frayed burlap distress oxide inks. And when that was dry, I stamped a number of our text stamps all over the background. You can see the little text over there, over here, and over the side. There's also some little tiny dragonflies that you can spot as well. Now, if your ink pads are juicy at all, I would definitely recommend stamping off before you stamp these images. I took these and stamped them with black ink just directly without stamping off, and you can see this is pretty dark. It's hard to get. Those stamps are so small and they have such detail that it's really easy to over ink your stamps. So I would suggest, especially if you're using a juicy ink pad, to stamp your stamp off once and then stamp it on your project. If you're using a MISTI or stamp positioner, you can always do that a couple of times and that'll help retain some of the detail that's on these smaller stamps. Now I added some textured dots on the side using some texture paste, some opaque Ranger texture paste, and just a little dotted stencil. You can see them down here too. It goes along with this pattern paper perfectly. And then of course I ink blended the edges with some vintage photo and black soot distress ink. I figured that was plenty for our background. I did stamp these 3 stamps on this 3" by 4" cut apart panel using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I was careful not to over ink, and I did stamp them off, then stamp them down. Got a really good image of that rose there, and the text is nice and sharp. I added a little color to the rose with some alcohol markers, and I stamped a few of the smaller images around the edges of that 3 by 4" panel. There's that little canceled postage mark. There's another butterfly. I added a thin mat of the black and white pattern paper. Behind that, of course, inking the edges with vintage photo ink as well, and then glued a piece of lace to the side here that I actually tinted with more vintage photo distress oxide ink. I ink distressed the edges of this yellow ticket, added a couple of pieces of cardstock behind that for a little dimension, glued that down to our card front, glued this whole panel down with some foam tape, added a few sequins here and there, and this yellow heart sticker that, of course, I did distress the edges of that as well. I hope this is what Lizi was going for when she put this kit together. Now, I learned a lot from this very first card. I don't do multimedia art journals or things like that. Don't ink smush directly on a card base. It's just too much stress. There's also a limit to how much multimedia you can add to a card before the return isn't really worth it anymore. Now, though these little embossed dots match the pattern paper, they're really not doing much at all for this whole design here. Always stamp off these stamps. Stamp off your stamps, especially if you're using them as background stamps. That will help retain a little bit of detail in those tiny stamps. Okay, let's see if I can follow my own advice here. Now we had one ephemera piece that was the exact same size as the matching image of it on one of the 3 by 4" panels. And we actually had 2 of these 3 by 4" panels. Here's one right here. I think the other one was a little bit lighter. It all begins with you. This is the image that we had, an ephemera piece that matched that perfectly in size. So for our next card, we've got, it all begins with today. There you go. Yes, today with this great bundle of flowers here, just exploding off the side of that little 3x4-inch panel here. Really like this card. So I did use my X-Acto knife to fussy cut the white borders away from this ephemera piece. Slow and steady does the trick. I really enjoy using my X-Acto knife, and this was actually not too awfully difficult to cut that white border away from it. It almost is like decoupage. If I had another white flower to put on top of that, I'd start calling that decoupage. Now, I ink blended the edges of that sentiment panel. This is the 3x4-inch panel with It All Begins With You. I ink blended some vintage photo ink around the edges of that. I matted that to a piece of this floral pattern paper that, of course, have the edges ink blended too. Glued those two pieces together. I took a piece of that nice blue pattern paper we had, cut it down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I ink blended the edges of that and then added a piece of ribbon across the bottom here. Now, this ribbon was actually from the Love From Lizi August 18 kit. I think we had a whole batch. Yes, we had a whole batch of lacy trims in that kit from December of 2018. I wrapped that around the bottom of my background. I also did a little just cut die. This is an old LDRS cut die that has an outline cut, but it will also just pierce this design into the side of your cardstock. You can see it there. It's really obvious in real life. A nice little touch of more multimedia for you with just a die on that. I wrapped the ribbon around the bottom and glued this down to our teal card base. Then I added our matted pieces on top with a piece of foam tape, added the today and the flowers with some foam tape as well. I did ink up the edges of all of my cut aparts and this today with some more of that vintage photo Distress Oxide ink. I tied a little bow with a piece of our twine, glued that to a little white sequin, and glued that down to our card front. It All Begins With Today. I thought that was more fun than It All Begins With You. Today seems like much more of an encouragement card. I was thrilled I was able to get this whole ephemera piece on this card. And gosh, this is kind of red, white, and blue, isn't it? I guess the 4th of July is right around the corner. Now we have another ephemera piece that matches, again, one of our 3x4-inch cut-apart panels. It's not quite the exact same size, but it's close enough that I think I can get away with it. And we have Oh, happy day, oh, happy day, happy day. Oh, happy day, the good life. This is a riot of red on this card. I really like this a lot. This is the ephemera piece that, of course, I took my X-Acto knife and I cut all of the white border away from that. I also cut the ribbon away from this panel here. This is actually the Good Life label plate from the sticker sheet. I wanted to replace what was on this actual ephemera piece. I forget what it was. Yes, the printed label plate said memories on this piece of ephemera. So I just trimmed the ribbon away from that and tucked in the Good Life label plate right under that. I did add a real little brad to the side of that, a little more multimedia for you. For the background of this card, I stamped the cherry red card base with 2 of the floral text background stamps. I think I used both of these on this one. I stamped it using vintage photo Distress Oxide ink and then misted a light coat of water on the top of that to get some of the chalky highlights to appear. I also spattered a little bit of white paint around the edges on that background as well. I took our little red ticket, did a little bit of ink blending on the sides again with vintage photo and glued that down to our card front. I attached our ephemera to the 3x4-inch panel with some foam tape and then glued that down to a thin chocolate mat. That is the chocolate pearlescent cardstock from our add-on cardstock pack this month. You can see that little pearlescent shine to that. That's that chocolate. I did the same thing for the banner. Inked blended a little bit of vintage photo around the edges, added a mat of that chocolate pearlescent cardstock, glued that to my main panel, added those both to the card front with some foam tape, a few red sequins, and of course that little brad. Add a little touch of sparkle to this firecracker of a card. Oh, happy day, happy day. I do like my red cards. I do like this. And I tell you, that ribbon looks real. Okay, I needed a little bit of a break after these 3 highly involved cards. So I turned to one of the large sentiments from one of our pattern papers, and we have never forget how amazing you are. What a perfectly nice, lovely little sentiment. I die cut that panel from the pattern paper with a lawn fawn stitched rectangle die. I stamped the lace borders stamp on the top and bottom using some Hero Arts Sea Salt Reactive ink. Again, I stamped that off and then stamped it on my project, trying to save some of that detail in that little tiny stamp. I actually did pretty good, and I think it adds a really nice touch to this dark pattern paper. I cut a piece of Hero Hues Antique Ivory cardstock to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I stamped one of the text stamps around all of the edges using that same vintage photo distress oxide ink. I glue those 2 panels together and then down to our black card base. I added 3 heart stickers and 3 little white sequins for some fun embellishment. And we have a fairly simple card that still feels a little multimedia. Never forget how amazing you are. Now we actually have a lot of these metal label plates on our sticker sheet and our cut apart sheets and our ephemera. A lot of them have terrific sentiments and sayings on them. I have lots of tiny brads. I couldn't resist this one. And we have You Bring the Sunshine. Oh, this gave me a chance to play with that big piece of lace in our embellishment bag. I cut a piece of plain white cardstock from my stash to 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I stamped the rose butterfly stamp and that little Paris stamp across the top and bottom using fossilized amber distress oxide ink. There's also some of the little tiny dragonflies you can see on the edges too. I did a really light ink blending on the edges with that same fossilized amber ink and then glued that down to my white card base. I trimmed the lace to this pleasant little shape and glued that to the card front. I glued this little sunshine ticket thing from our sticker sheet right behind the lace and stuck that right to the top of the card. And I added the ephemera flowers with some foam tape. No need to fussy cut the white edges on that one. I added a couple of tiny brads to the sentiment sticker label plate, and I mounted that towards the bottom here with foam tape. Now, I used some yellow glassine paper. This is kite paper that I actually doubled up. Here's the single layer of that kite paper, and you can see here where it's doubled up. And I die cut that little dragonfly outline from that, and stroke of luck, it actually wrinkled that paper like almost perfectly on his wings. It looks like that die is almost embossed, but of course it's not. But we have lovely veining in those wings. I colored his body with just a black marker, and then I glued just his body down to the lace here. Some of the gold sequins for a little bit more sparkle and shine. This is a very cheerful, very sunshiny card. You bring the sunshine. I think that's a great sentiment. That's a really pretty piece of lace, and I thought it added a lot to that card, and I've got more to play with. So for my next card here, again, we've got the Made with Love on the back, and we have a lovely hello card with more of that lace. Now, I stamped the bird and label stamp from our stamp set on the teal card base using some broken china distress oxide ink. I stamped it off, then stamped it onto my background here. I ink blended around this little blue hello ticket, and I ink blended around the edges of this. This is about 1 1/4 by 5 1/2, that polka dot pattern paper. Ink blended more of the vintage photo around all the edges of those and glued those down to our card base, where I continued, again, that ink blending around the edges of the card base. I glued this large piece of ribbon across the middle of this card, taking care to really make sure I added glue to the edges so they wouldn't fray or anything. Then I added the hello this ephemera piece and our little birdie sticker with some foam tape. No ink blending on the edges of those, although I did ink blend a little on this heart that I added at the top of the polka dot right there. That's one of the ephemera piece hearts right there, added with some foam tape. And then I die cut this button. This original ephemera piece has a button right there, but I looked through my stash and sure enough, I have this little button die. This is actually from the Love From Lizi June of 2018 card kit. So I die cut the top of that button from this amazing sticker piece, and then die cut a couple of thick white cardstock to go behind that, glued those all together so we have a nice thick button there. I tied some of the twine through there, some of the taken apart twine through the holes on my button, and glued that over the button right there on our ephemera piece. Yet a little bit more multimedia for you. This is pretty, a symphony in blue. Lovely hello card. And on the inside, I did add the P.S. I love you on the bottom. Okay, I guess if you give me a lot of large florals in a card kit, I'm naturally drawn to fussy cut them out. Is that a tendency of mine? For my next card here, we are on the black card base, and we've got believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable. Now, I fussy cut these floral images away from the You Are Enough pattern paper, and I inked all the edges with Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. I die cut this sentiment from one of the 3x4-inch panels of our cut apart sheet. I die cut that with a Hero Arts Infinity die, Tag Frames Infinity die. I die cut that and, of course, the black background for that, and glued those together after, of course, ink blending our little sentiment piece. Glued those both together. Got this piece of our polka dot pattern paper to 4 by 5¼ inches. I ink blended the edges of that, of course, with more Vintage Photo. I took some of our twine and wrapped it around the top of that background piece a couple of times. Then I glued that all down to my black card base. I added our ephemera piece and frame with some foam tape, and then I added the flowers. I glued the flowers' edges flat down on the card and then added foam tape on their outer edges so that they would have some dimension, but they wouldn't stick up on the sides. I was really pleased I was able to slip a little edge of these flowers underneath the twine here, keep this piece above the twine there. Very multimedia with this. Believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable. Again, a really terrific sentiment with some really lovely flower images from our kit. We have one more label plate in our ephemera pack that caught my eye, and I was really itching to use that big single bloom that was on our sticker sheet. So for our next card, again, made with love on the back, we have I Am Grateful for You, a nice little thank you card featuring that great big single bloom from our sticker sheet. So on the warm yellow card base, I stamped the floral stamps and some extra text using aged mahogany distress oxide ink and second generation stamping again. I didn't over ink these stamps. They work really nicely in the background. I cut this pattern paper to 2¼ inches wide, 5½ inches tall, matted that on some of our gold specialty cardstock that's cut to 2½ inches wide, and then down to the green glitter cardstock that's cut to 2 5/8 inches wide. Glued those all together, glued those down to the center of my card base. I again added some gold brads to the edges of this metal frame plate. Added that to the card front with some foam tape, slipped my flower in behind there and added foam tape behind the top of that. No fussy cutting needed on this flower at all. A bunch of little white sequins gives us a little more sparkle, a little more shine on this card. I'm grateful for you. Really pretty thank you card. I still have some of that glassine kite paper sitting on my desk from when I cut this small dragonfly die, and I wanted to try using it on the big dragonfly die. So for our next card, again, I'm made with love, and we have a Just Wing It card, just about an all die cut card. That kite paper works so well in the wings of that dragonfly. Don't know if it reads very well. You can see some of that shine there. You can see right through it on the card as well. Now, I took a plain piece of white cardstock from my stash and I dry embossed the Altenew Fine Frames cover die on that to get this nice little square embossing that's going smaller and smaller. I trimmed that down and then sent that through my printer to print the Just Wing It sentiment on there. I created that using my Silhouette software and the Noteworthy font. I trimmed that panel down and then glued it to my white card base. I die cut my Dragonfly with some black tie glitter cardstock. I die cut the flowers from more of that dark pattern paper, and then covered the back of everything with that glassine paper, trimmed the edges away, glued these all together, added them to our card front with some foam tape. I also die cut a couple of those leaves from some more green glassine paper and glued those behind the flowers for a little extra touch. This feels a little bit more familiar to me than all of this multimedia stuff, although I do love the fact that I got his eyes yellow on the Dragonfly. Just wing it. Well, there's some encouragement for you. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have been steering away from the butterflies in this kit. There are a lot of butterflies in this card kit, but we just had a whole kit devoted to butterflies just a couple of months ago. But, well, alas, I guess I couldn't avoid them forever for our last card here on the cherry red card base. Again, it's made with love, and we have our butterfly card, You Are Loved. I actually really like this card quite a bit. Now, I stamped the Altenew Dainty Swiss Dots stamp on this cherry red card base using Versamark ink, and then embossed that with Lizi's Golden Crown embossing powder. Oh, red and gold always works perfectly together. Covered up that background perfectly with some beautiful gold polka dots. I trimmed out these 3 butterflies from that pattern paper that had 5 butterflies, I think. This is about 2¼ inches by 4 3/4 of an inch. And then using my matte knife, I cut out all their wings, but didn't cut up their bodies, folded up their wings. Then I glued that pattern paper piece down to a mat of that gold specialty cardstock and glued those to the left side of my card front. I love the fact that you see gold underneath the wings of the butterflies. And if you hold it at just the right angle, it actually looks like all those wings are outlined with gold. I thought this little piece came out much better than I thought it would. Now, I fussy cut this sentiment from the 3x4 inch cut apart panel that said, You Are Loved, You Are Enough. I just cut the first 2 out of that. I glued them to super thin gold mats as well and mounted them to the card front with some more foam tape. I did add little pieces of foam tape behind the wings just to make sure that they kept some dimension, didn't flatten right down into their cutout holes. There's some butterflies for you. I had to give in ultimately. Now, I haven't used any of this cut apart sheet. This is the 4 inch by 4 inch cut apart sheet. So back in April of 2020, I used a cut apart sheet to make a card box from 1 sheet of 12 by 12 paper. I thought I would share with you how I did that back then. I would love to explain all of the mathematics to you, but the big idea is to make a card box where this image is right on the center front of your card box. So on the long side, this is going to be the 5.5 inch side. This is the front of our cardstock. Put it in our score pal. On the long side, we are going to score at 2 1/8, 2 1/8, 3 1/8, and then 8 7/8, and 9 7/8. So these are going to make a 1 inch thick card box. Then we'll turn it 90 degrees. And this time we're doing the 4 1/4 inch width here. So we're going to score this at 2 3/4, 3 3/4, 8 1/4, and 9 1/4. Now, where can we see those score lines the best? on pattern paper. Initially, let's go ahead and cut out our corners. We're going to cut out the 4 corners completely. You can lose those on all 4 sides. Do this on all 4 corners. And that's our last corner right there. So that's our pattern paper so far. Let's go ahead and score all these lines. I think it will show you what's going on better than this pattern paper is going to. So this is the front, center, so everything will fold to the back. We'll have those lovely butterflies on the inside of this box. There's 2 scores on each side. Now that our corners are gone, we've got a long score and then a short score. Now I think you can start to see how the box is going to come together. So pick your bottom. This is our bottom. That's going to be our top. This wants to be the right side up. So on this one, we're going to cut this little square. It's a little square right there. We're going to cut 3 sides of that away and leave it attached to the side. So we'll cut 1, 2, and 3. That should be fine. We'll do the same on this side, all 3 sides of that tab. 1, 2, leaving it attached to the side piece here. And that's going to help us make our bottom right away. So I think I'll use some liquid glue on this. We're going to glue this tab to the bottom. It'll slide in right there. I think you can see that there. Sorry, this is crazy pattern paper. We just glued that corner right there. Nothing else is glued in. We're going to do the same on the other side. Glue the back of this tab and glue that to the bottom here. Bring that bottom tab in. That'll show you exactly where it belongs. Make your corners nice and square. Now with just those 2 folded, we can see our box come together. Now this is our top. So the flap for the top, we want that little square to stay attached to this piece. We do not need this extra piece here. So we're going to cut along this score line right to the center there. I think you can see that better on this side. And then cut that extra flapper off. Do the same on the other side. Go straight cut all the way along this score mark. And then cut that extra piece off. And then we want to cut that 3rd side of that tab, leaving it attached to the side again. That's the side of the top. Those tabs would fold in. This is basically our box. And the front is that. It's the little things. Here we go. We can lose this piece also. We can lose these 2 pieces on the side. This is going to make the flap that folds over and closes the box. So we can lose these extra pieces as well. So there are a million ways you can assemble these. This seemed like the most sturdy and fun. So I'm going to add glue to the flaps on the bottom here. You could do this with score tape. You could do this with tape runners. I like liquid glue. I know it's never going to go anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side at the same time. Add glue to the back of this flap. I'm going to fold that up into position. Fold those flaps open, and those are our sides. Little bone folder comes in handy to get into that little space and press it down. There's also a little bit of wiggle room when you use liquid glue. So there's the bottom of our box. This is going to come over the top exactly like that. And you can cut off those flaps if you like. You can wrap them around the bottom if you like. I think I'll keep them on. I think I'll wrap them around the bottom. And then I'm going to add glue to this whole flap from this all the way down to the bottom. From this edge here all the way down. I'm going to wrap this around the bottom. Just give it a little bit more stability, a little extra bottom weight. Press those into place. I've got possibly a little bit of excess on that bottom flap over there. Just trim that down just a little bit. That feels nice and sturdy. We'll do the same on this side, from the edge of the pattern paper here, all the way down. Fold that over and fold that up. Got a bigger piece over here. Easy to trim those overhangs. And use your bone folder to press those together. There is basically our box. We need to do our flap here. I like to cut a curve in these side pieces so they slide in instead of having to be pushed in. So I'll just draw a simple curve from corner to corner. I'll do that on both sides. Just a simple little curve. They don't have to be fat. They don't have to match. They don't have to be perfect by any means. We're just gonna trim those down, and the same on the other side. There you go. Those fold in quite nicely. Now we have to mark our flap. That looks great. I love how that goes together. So let's just put some cards in there for now. And we're gonna tuck this flap in, trying not to bend it. And now we can mark it. We wanna give a mark right where it crosses that. We'll also put little marks where the side pieces are. That's how we'll cut our top piece. Take our T-square and go to that horizontal line that we drew, and we're going to continue that line straight across the two sides of the card. Now we're going to take that line where we cut the center, and we'll just go straight down with that and straight down with that. So these are the two corners we're going to cut away to make our folding flap. Right on top of your pencil marks, or you can cut your pencil marks away completely on both sides. So this little center tab is going to tuck in behind the bottom piece. So this is actually a card box that closes itself. Okay, we can lose our pencil marks now. Do a quick check for fit. And there you go, with our image perfectly centered on the front of this card box. It's the little things. We can dress this up a little bit. We'll take our corner chomper and curve some corners here. I'll do a 1/2 inch on the edges of the flap here, both sides. And let's do the 1/4 inch on our little flappy here. And a 1/4 inch on the other side. That'll work. There you go, lovely. So you've got little side tabs that will come down and wrap inside, and you've got a little flap that will go inside. I think that's a really good use of a sheet of 12 by 12 inch pattern paper, especially when it has these great cut aparts that you can take advantage of on the front of your card box. I mean, this is literally all the pieces we have left from that 12 by 12 sheet. That's all that's left. We used, I would say, 90% of that 12 by 12 sheet to make this great little card box. And so here's my little card box, my little gift box. I added this little best ever ephemera piece over the back here. And instead of stuffing this full of cards and giving it as a nice little card set to somebody, I decided to try something a little differently. So let's see what's got put inside of this little gift box. The string just pulls right off. We'll open the back, pull out the contents, and what do we have here? This is a mini card kit. I've got 5 envelopes here in a little glimmer gold. I've got 5 card bases, more of that glimmer gold. I've got 3 sheets of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch pattern paper. I have a whole bunch of sheets cut to different sizes of all sorts of pattern paper, even little 1/2 inch strips of that. There's 3 of the 2 by 2 inch cut aparts, 3 squares of that. We've got 6 of these 3 inch by 4 inch cut apart panels, all of which have a sentiment on them already, except for that one. Thankful for you. We've got a little collection of stickers here. We've got 6 sheets of glue dots. We've got 1 sheet of foam stickers, and we also have a little embellishment bag too with some twine, some ribbon from that old Lizi kit. Here's that butterfly ribbon as well, a small pack of sequins there, a bunch of ephemera pieces as well, a little mini kit all packed into an A2 card box. You can make 5 cards and then put them in this card box to give to somebody else. I thought this was a great idea. Heaven knows Lizi fills our kits with so much stuff. You can easily get a couple of rounds out of one kit, I would think. I kind of figured that most everybody would have some kind of liquid glue at home. This all slides nicely into our little card kit. Fold our top on down. We still have that back piece on this, so that will go behind the flap, and there we go. It kind of closes itself right up. Best ever. We can slide our twine right back onto the front. I did come up with a little template for creating these A2 card boxes from 1 sheet of 12 by 12 inch pattern paper. You can download this template over at my website at cardcutups.com. There'll be a download button there. You can download that and print this for yourself. Of course, you can cut a lot of these extra tabs away on the bottom when you're gluing this together, but I thought you'd all like if I shared that with you. A good reference to have in your stash. I think I know a few people who would get a kick out of receiving a gift like this. What do you think? I thought it was just so much fun and a much better idea than just putting a bunch of pre-made cards in there and giving it to somebody. It's the little things. Now that wraps up my adventures with the Love from Lizi July 2021 Summer Botany card kit. Got 10 cards. I've got a little mini card kit just ready for gift giving. It's a really nice collection of multimedia cards this month. We've got like and love cards, thank you cards, a number of encouragement cards. I did use almost every stamp in this stamp set. Some of these tinier sentiments I didn't end up using. I do have a good amount of cut-aparts left, including a bunch of the 3 by 4 inch panels, 2 by 2, a large bunch of the stickers still left over. I tell you, between the cards and the little card kit, I kind of decimated my pattern paper pack. This is all the pattern paper pieces that I have left. I used a good amount of our specialty cardstocks. You know, I didn't get to those peel-offs this month. I did use 4 of our dies, a lot of the embellishments, but you know, I didn't get to those paper flowers. I did add a paper flower to my little mini kit, 1 paper flower. I didn't get to them. I thought they were just a tad big for my card designs. And of course, I avoided the butterfly ribbon like the plague. But I still have ephemera pieces, some larger ones as well. I actually had a lot of fun with this kit. I always enjoy it when Lizi pushes my buttons and makes me work in a style that I'm not necessarily perfectly familiar with. Now, this kit is still available at Love From Lizi. If I've managed to capture your imagination or given you an idea or two, please use my links in the description down below when you do go shopping with Lizi. It truly helps support this channel and all of my efforts, and it's always greatly appreciated. Thank you. And I want to give you a big thanks from the bottom of my heart for sharing your time with me here today. Words cannot express how very much I appreciate your support. Please remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all of your friends. Beware of the heat index. And as always, I wish you and yours cool breezes, light and laughter, and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.